In its third week, Russia's war on Ukraine has seen more fighting, more suffering, and more attempts to find a diplomatic way out of the violence. Authorities in Ukraine say rocket attacks have destroyed an airbase near the town of Vasylkiv in the Kyiv region. And President Zelenskyy has also accused Russia of kidnapping the mayor of the occupied city of Melitopol. Officials released this footage, which they say shows him being abducted. His whereabouts remain unknown. Now, meanwhile, Russian forces appear to be closing in on the Ukrainian capital. Shelling has already reached the outskirts of Kiev.
Fire crews rushed to the scene after a mortar struck an apartment building on the outskirts of Kyiv. The artillery shelling started at around 6:30 in the morning. There are people living in these apartment buildings, civilians. This is a suburban area here. With Russia stepping up its bombardment of Ukrainian cities, including the capital, it's feared more and more civilians will be caught in the crossfire. Satellite images show Russian forces just 25 kilometers from central Kyiv. President Volodymyr Zelenskyy has promised Ukrainians will put up a stiff fight in what he's calling a war for the country's independence. We have no right to let up in the intensity of our defense, no matter how difficult it is. We have no right to let up in the force of our resistance. The enemy is bringing more columns into Ukrainian territory. The besieged port city of Mariupol continues to bear the full brunt of Russia's bombardment. The humanitarian situation is worsening by the hour for hundreds of thousands trapped without power, running water, or fresh food. In the nearby southern city of Melitopol, which has already been taken by Russian forces, residents turned out to protest against the alleged kidnapping of their mayor and to demand his release. As fighting rages, people in and around Kyiv will be hoping and praying that last-minute diplomacy could still spare them the worst of what has happened to other Ukrainian cities.
Let's get straight across to Kyiv and speak to DW's correspondent, Matthias Bollinger. Matthias, Britain's defense ministry saying Russian ground forces are advancing on Kyiv's city center. Can you tell us your assessment of the situation?
So about 25 kilometers from where I am standing, Russian troops seem to be enhancing their positions. However, they have been there for almost since the beginning of the war, so for weeks. So it's absolutely unclear why the British are saying that they are closing in on Kiev. What has happened is that Russia has brought more troops inside this, into these positions, and it seems to have hold some ground there and have taken firmer control of these areas. But it doesn't look like they are closer to the city center than they have been yesterday, the day before yesterday, or a week ago. What we have seen is, well, this guy was just shouting slurs at Putin. People here, of course, are very angry at what's happening. So, and then somebody is passing by and he's shouting glory to Ukraine. So you can see it's very emotional. These troops that are there, they have been standing there for some time, and there was a column, if you remember, that was 60 kilometers long, looked like rolling towards Kiev but didn't move. This column has dispersed, and this has led some analysts to say that Russia's troops are regrouping now. They're trying a different strategy.
Well, thanks for that, Matthias. We see the anger there on the streets from those people who were walking past you. I want to ask about the situation in Kyiv itself, especially with regard to supplies. Where do things stand? Will people be able to hold out against a possible Russian onslaught?
The question is what this Russian onslaught will look like. So there are different scenarios that are probable and that are feared here. One of them would be that Russia would be able to close the ring around the capital, and then we would see something similar to Mariupol, people not being able to leave, supplies not coming in. I believe that the city has, of course, stocked up with supplies, but you only get that far with these supplies. And we are also seeing that a lot of places inside the city have been fortified. There are lots of roadblocks, etc. The other scenario is a mass bombardment like in Kharkiv, where huge parts of the city, of the residential areas of the city, are constantly being shelled, and thus a humanitarian crisis is brought upon the city. This is another thing. Of course, it would be very hard for people to live under these circumstances and to cope with them. But for now, what we've been seeing also is that despite all efforts, Russian troops have not managed to get any closer to the city than they have been. There have been a few advances, others have been fought back. So basically, it stays where it is, but with a lot more firepower and troops seemingly coming in.
Let's talk about the diplomatic efforts. Ukrainian President Zelenskyy has suggested talks with Russia in Jerusalem. What else can you tell us about that proposal?
Jerusalem has taken the initiative to talk to both leaders. Jerusalem has very good relations. The actual Israeli government has very good relations to Putin's government, and there was an effort to negotiate between the two. However, so far what we are hearing is that nothing of this has really worked, or that there haven't been any results. There has been the news that Israel was pressuring Ukraine to surrender. This has been this has been falsified by the Ukrainian government, saying that there had not been such a pressure. And as a reaction to these news, Zelenskyy has suggested that Israel might invite the two parties to negotiate in Jerusalem. But it's only one possible way where people could be negotiating. The problem is, what could they be negotiating against when there is the maximum demand from Russia that Russia is still upholding, that Ukraine basically give up its army and its sovereignty, and Ukraine demanding Russian troops out of the country. So there is not much to negotiate about, except, and that's the hope, that this might be advancing. There have been attempts to negotiate smaller problems like humanitarian corridors to release the pressure on the population, to relieve the humanitarian crisis. This is probably something that's much more likely to negotiate upon than any outcome of the war.
Okay, our correspondent Matthias Bollinger reporting for us from Kyiv. Thank you so much, and please stay safe. And I want to get across now to Maria Syrichenko. I've been speaking to her on DW News over the past week after she had to flee her home in Mariupol for the relative safety of the western Ukrainian city of Lviv. Hi, Maria. Welcome back, and thanks again for taking the time under these terrible circumstances. First, some of our viewers may remember that your grandmother is still in Mariupol, and the last time we spoke, you'd been unable to contact her for more than a week. Have you had any update on her situation now?
Hi, and thanks for having me again. Yes, I haven't heard anything from her for 11 days already, so still no connection with her or with other relatives that live in Mariupol. However, yesterday we managed to get some updates from the neighbor who escaped the city 2 days ago. And they didn't see my grandmother personally. However, they shared that while they were there, they saw the curtains in my grandma's house raised, every morning. So at least this piece of information gives me and my family some hope that she is there, she is alive. So this is the only news that I get from someone in Mariupol during the last few days.
That must be terrible to have just that piece of information, but also encouraging to see that sign of life. You said you've had no communication with others in Mariupol. Are you hearing anything about the situation there from others?
Yeah, I didn't manage to reach any of my close people. However, my friend's parents called her yesterday. They managed to find some spot in the center of the city where there was some weak mobile network. And they shared that the city is being shelled every hour, every minute. And I heard from Telegram channel, there are some groups when people communicate and exchange some information between them. So I heard that my neighborhood where my parents live, it was really damaged yesterday and today, and the bomb hit my house where my parents have an apartment, and I have no idea whether my apartment is still there or it's completely destroyed. So this is terrifying.
And Maria, you're in Lviv now. What is your plan from there?
Well, I'm still here. I still have no plans to leave the country within the nearest future, and I hope that the situation, at least here, will remain a bit stable as it is now, and we continue helping our people. For instance, today we were again on the railway station trying to get some humanitarian stuff to Kiev, and there are a lot of people here, and everyone wants to take part in some volunteering initiatives and help each other.
Right, Maria, we're going to leave it there. Thank you again for joining us on DW News, and please take care.
Thank you.
And the UN says more than 2.5 million refugees have fled to other countries since the invasion of Ukraine began. The majority of those people, 1.5 million, according to Polish border authorities, have headed to Poland. Others have made their way to Hungary, Slovakia, Moldova, and Romania. More than 100,000 have also entered Russia. And I'm now joined by DW correspondent Brigitte Schulke. She joins me from Poland near the border with Ukraine. Hi, welcome to the show. Thanks for joining us. You've just been speaking to these Ukrainian refugees arriving. Can you tell us a little bit about what their journeys have been like?
We heard a lot of harrowing accounts today because the people who are arriving here, the women and children, actually fled a war zone. They experienced heavy shelling. They had been trapped in bunkers for days. During their escape, they had often to sleep in the freezing nights while waiting at the border. Some were even shot at. So they're very relieved that they are here now, but they are still so worried about those who they had to leave behind, so their husbands, their other family parts like parents. So they really need some time to adapt to the new situation they suddenly in, and we recorded some of their accounts, and maybe we can just listen in.
All our forces threw themselves against Putin. He is a criminal. He's the problem. His army used tanks to attack my grandmother's house. We prayed to God to grant us safe passage. My child was crying all the time because people were dying. We didn't want to go away. We didn't want to leave our houses. We only went away to save ourselves.
It was very scary when the bombs hit our town directly. We lost light, electricity and water. And at 5 in the morning, the bombs were falling down again right in the center of the city. They killed people. The bombs killed 21 people, including 3 children. I have nightmares when I'm thinking about it.
It's hard to wrap your head around just how much these people have left behind. Brigitte, I want to ask you, from where you stand, how well Poland has been able to accommodate these people arriving.
I think they are really doing a very, very good job here. Compared to the first day, the help is much better organized now. We just came back from the border crossing, and there are a lot of volunteers there who are providing food and clothes, and the people who are arriving, they are immediately registered, so they don't have to wait anymore in the cold, and they are placed on buses to be relocated to other cities. But still, I mean, it's a huge challenge for everybody here. Just to give you an example, we are here now in the city of Przemysl, and this city has only 60,000 citizens, but they are welcoming between 30,000 and 50,000 refugees every day. So that needs a lot of resources.
That's right. We've heard Polish authorities saying 1.5 million people have already arrived. If they continue arriving in Poland at this pace, will the authorities there be able to manage?
This will depend on how much help Poland is getting from other European countries, especially if it comes to relocating the refugees. But from what we hear here from the people, there's a strong commitment to further welcome the refugees. The only problem is right now the whole relief effort is heavily depending on volunteers and the small communities like Przemysl, where we are here now. And we, in a way, we sense a growing frustration amongst those groups because the Polish government hasn't provided any additional help yet. So there is a little of frustration. They are really waiting to get some more funding, but to be clear, this frustration is directed towards their own government rather than the refugees.
Okay. DW's Birgitta Schulke, thank you so much for your reporting. Let's bring you up to speed now on some other developments in the conflict. A Ukrainian woman evacuated from a Mariupol maternity hospital after a Russian airstrike has had her baby. Little Veronica was born in another hospital on the city's outskirts. Russia's attack on the children's and maternity hospital on Wednesday led to widespread international condemnation. The International Atomic Energy Agency says power has been partially restored to Chernobyl nuclear power station, the site of the 1986 nuclear disaster. Ukrainian technicians say they are repairing the plant, which was seized by Russian forces early in the war. The power cut led to fears over the safety of the spent reactor rods stored at the plant. U.S. troops continue to be deployed to Europe, adding to thousands who have already been sent to support NATO allies following Russia's invasion of Ukraine. About 130 soldiers left the U.S. state of Georgia. The Pentagon has ordered roughly 12,000 service members from U.S. bases to Europe. France says Russian President Vladimir Putin shows no willingness to end the war with Ukraine. French President Emmanuel Macron and German Chancellor Olaf Scholz held joint telephone talks with Putin on Saturday afternoon. And during the 90-minute call, the two Western leaders urged Putin to agree to an immediate ceasefire in Ukraine. Scholz's office said he and Macron called on Putin to begin the process of finding a diplomatic solution. Putin briefed Macron and Scholz on recent talks between Russian and Ukrainian negotiating teams. And let's dive into this with our political correspondent, Thomas Sparrow. He joins me now in the studio. Thomas, can you tell us more about what has come out of this round of diplomacy?
So France and Germany have placed their hopes for a long time already, but now more than ever on trying to find a diplomatic solution. What that specifically means is that they want, first and foremost, a ceasefire, an immediate ceasefire. That's something that did come out of that talk, that they asked Vladimir Putin for that specific ceasefire. That has to be the precondition for what was then described as structured talks to try and find a political solution to this war. Now, that is the goal. But if you judge by what French officials have been saying after that call, turning those goals into concrete action will be particularly difficult, with French officials stressing that from that call it was clear that Vladimir Putin did not show any willingness to end the war in Ukraine. So at least we have here the concrete goal that German and French leaders now have. Turning that into action will be another matter altogether.
Now, they're, of course, not the first leaders who've attempted to mediate between Russia and Ukraine. How successful do you think Macron and Scholz are likely to be?
Well, they have already played an important role even before this war. Let's not forget that France and Germany in various circumstances, in various crises, have worked hand in hand to try and find solutions. And in particular, in the Ukrainian context, after the 2014 crisis, France and Germany did play a very important role mediating in trying to find a political solution to the situation in the eastern part of Ukraine. You may know the Normandy format, which then also led to the so-called Minsk agreements. France and Germany did play an important role there, and as such, they still believe now that they can play a very important role when it comes to finding a diplomatic, a political solution to the war. But it's important to see this from a wider perspective. It's not only Germany and France. We see, for example, leaders in Israel also willing to play an important role, in Turkey trying to play an important diplomatic role. What all this tells us is that the international community is particularly interested in trying to find diplomatic solutions to this war, even though it is particularly difficult at the moment.
And in fact, it's not just heads of state trying to find a solution. We have this rather unusual case where the former German Chancellor Gerhard Schröder has actually attempted to get involved in negotiations, even flying to Moscow this week. He's, of course, been strongly criticized for connections to the Kremlin, and let's call it these freelance mediation attempts. Do you think his involvement is the reason why Chancellor Scholz has decided to get involved now?
No, I don't think it's the reason why Chancellor Scholz is getting involved now. I think that is something that the German government had wanted to do already in the past, to try and find a diplomatic solution to this situation. But it does make diplomatic efforts, official diplomatic efforts, more and more difficult, especially from a German perspective, because it gives the impression to the outside world that Germany is not only one position, that it's not working on a united front, that you have on the one hand the German government and on the other hand Gerhard Schröder, the former German Chancellor between 1998 and 2005, who has been indeed very criticized by his closeness to the Kremlin and by his job as a gas lobbyist for Russian energy giants. And it's important to stress that this visit by Gerhard Schröder was not coordinated with the current German government. From his perspective, from Gerhard Schröder's perspective, I understand, or at least I believe this would be an attempt on his side to try and polish his image a little bit, try and clean up that image that has been very criticized, because he has refused so far to drop, to cancel those appointments that he has with those energy giants from Russia. So a very difficult situation altogether from the German perspective, because it makes official negotiations much more difficult than expected.
Our political correspondent, Thomas Sparrow, thanks so much for joining me in the studio with that update.